Well, hello everyone and welcome to the iWoman Report. I'm Cathleen Trigg-Jones. This week has been one of the scariest I think most of us have experienced in our lifetime, well, at least since 9/11. And I was just thinking the key difference with the coronavirus is that this is a world crisis, a pandemic, and so are the fears about our health and well-being. They're felt on a global level, as well as the concerns about our economy and whether we are headed for a recession or worse, a depression. I do want to dive into that a little more, but first I want to bring you the latest headlines from this week. More than 1,000 deaths here in the U.S. are now linked to the coronavirus. A $2 trillion stimulus package will deliver $1,200 checks to many Americans, but will it make a difference to you? We'll ask our expert. Almost every child in America, or in the world actually, is being homeschooled. What is the best advice we can give you? And no, ladies, it's not drink more wine. And how are you feeling? No, I mean, how are you really feeling? Well, it's a good time to check in on those closest to you. We're going to give you some warning signs to look out for. All right, so listen up, a third of the world's population is on coronavirus lockdown. Who would have thought? I mean, a few months ago, we had never even heard of such a thing. Now, it's all anyone is talking about. And it's literally controlling the lives of almost every single human being on the planet. Nearly 90% of the world's student population is out of school due to corona. You can't even leave your house. You can't leave your state or even your country in many cases. And whether you're on the side of those who are worried or the side of those who are in complete denial, it's safe to say we all have been affected in some shape or form now by corona. But how do we keep ourselves safe? I asked our in-house expert, Dr. Michael Jones, my husband, to join us to talk about this because, well, we have nothing to do but talk these days.
I've got nothing but time on my hands, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it gives us a lot to talk about. So let's dive into the coronavirus versus the flu, because that's one of the biggest questions that I've seen, and a lot of people have been asking, why should I be more concerned about this than the flu when the flu to date has killed more people than corona?
Well, you're absolutely right. The flu ultimately will kill or has killed more people than corona. We don't know where coronavirus is ultimately going to go and how many deaths there ultimately will be, but from what we have seen, the death rate is much higher than with the common cold or the common influenza bug. So we're looking at a death rate with the influenza of about 0.1%, whereas with coronavirus, it's looking like it might be 3, 4, maybe even higher percentage. So 30 to 40 times higher kill rate when you're infected with coronavirus than with the common flu.
Right. Now, that is, though, if you have an underlying medical problem, right?
That is what we initially thought, but we're finding that even younger kids or younger adults that were supposedly healthy are still succumbing to this virus. So we don't understand completely whether it's because they had some pre-existing lung condition that was unrecognized. Perhaps it might have to do with vaping. We're not really certain.
So if you don't know you're at high risk, then should everyone just be taking the same precautions right now?
Definitely all of the medical professionals are recommending that everyone take the same precautions. Everyone needs to practice good social distancing.
Which we're clearly not doing right now.
We're clearly not doing it. We all need to engage in significant hand washing, 20 seconds. Make sure you get the back of the hands, the fingernails. We all need to be utilizing hand sanitizer as much as possible. We need to restrict ourselves from taking our hands and touching our face. We know that that's something that's very hard for people. We're always wiping our nose, scratching our eyes. We really want to be cognizant about keeping those hands away from our face. And so if we also want to be cognizant of our fever or our temperature. Mm-hmm. If you have a fever, that's a time to stay home. That's a time to stay away from others in your family. You can find a room or a corner or isolate yourself. And we know of many people that have had the virus, but their family members didn't contract the virus. So there is a way to kind of practice that social distancing even within your own home.
Well, let me ask you that, because that then leads to a question about, is it herd, what is it called, herd immunity?
Herd immunity.
Herd immunity. So herd immunity is the belief that many people that are not in a high risk category, right, should all just go ahead and become infected, So family members, just go ahead and infect one another so you can get through this together, and then you're done with it. Is that?
Well, herd immunity is a little controversial, and essentially the belief is that, look, if enough people in society are infected with this bug and become immune to the bug, then the bug doesn't have a host to kind of move around and bounce around to, and to continue to transmit itself. So some people have put out this school of thought that if we can get 60% of the people, 60% of our population to have immunity, that maybe that would be enough so that the virus could not continue to spread. People have taken it even a step further and have suggested we're worried about overutilizing the healthcare system.
Right.
So why not, in a very controlled manner, controlled infection with populations of people who would have the least likely chance of dying? So you take a population of people that would be young and healthy, no pre-existing conditions, don't smoke, don't vape, and you say, okay, Javits Center, instead of this being a hospital, we're going to have a 2-week infection party for 5,000 people.
Okay.
And you're going to get 5,000 people infected, and you're going to get 5,000 people, God willing, cured, and now they're out into society,
Right.
going back to work, and then you bring in another wave of people, and you're constantly doing this until you get to that 60% point, and then hopefully the virus won't continue to spread.
Okay.
Very controversial.
Right.
It is not mainstream, but that is something that people are thinking
I'd be
about.
curious to see how many people would volunteer to do that. I'm not gonna lie.
I would
I would
volunteer.
too, but
I
not at
would
the Javits
volunteer.
Center. Like if I could do it in my home, if I can be comfortable in my
Yes.
bed and just get it over with, I would like to do that. But I don't want to be in.
But the problem with that is you don't want to get infected and know that you're infected and then go out into society and spread the infection.
Let's talk about the drug, because earlier this week, President Trump came out and said that this drug that is usually used to treat autoimmune diseases, lupus in particular, has shown some success potentially with patients. And what's happening now is that even doctors are beginning to abuse, I don't want to put doctors on the spot, but I've seen reports of doctors now over-prescribing this to patients so they can have a stash in case they get sick, they can try it. Is this the right thing to be doing right now?
Short, no, it's not the right thing. And funny thing is that I've had several people call me to write them prescriptions for this and to try to get this medication for them. It's not the right thing to do. We don't have a controlled study that actually indicates that it is effective.
Okay.
And that's what we as medical professionals operate with. We need data that says this treatment works. And we don't have that. We don't have a study that actually says this treatment is effective. So you have the president, who we all take as our leader, our surrogate leader, who's setting the tone for our country, telling us that this is a promising thing. Of course, you're going to have millions of people that are going to be
Run out
asking
and try to get it.
and try to do this. And then the people that actually need it, that need the antimalarials, who need the antibiotic portion in order to help with a respiratory infection, now those that need it can't find it.
Right.
And that's the travesty, because we really don't know if it works.
Right. Okay.
Now, what we would love to have, and what I think that someone needs to create, and very quickly, is an immunity test that we can all take, because we all want to know if 80% of the people that get this virus are really asymptomatic, don't have any symptoms. You and I may have already had this virus.
I think I had it already.
Yeah, I think I've had it as
Yeah.
well, as much as I travel. And so we want to know, why are we cooped up in the house? If we've already had it,
Right.
let's take a test, let's know, and then we're free to go.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Yeah, get back to work.
Yep, I'm going. So
Okay.
I can find somebody to operate on.
It sure helps to have a doctor in the family. A $2 trillion stimulus package has been approved. Is it too little, too late? New York's Governor Cuomo says it's bad for New York.
This response to this virus has probably already cost us $1 billion. It will probably cost us several billion dollars when we're done. New York City only gets $1.3 billion from this package. That is a drop in the bucket as to need.
But what does it mean for you? I spoke with our financial expert, Madam Money, earlier to get her to break it all down for us. All right, so joining us right now is Tarra, Madam Money Jackson. And this is, we're right in the middle of the vote on whether or not this stimulus package is going to get approved. I think the Senate passed it unanimously, but it's still stuck. But what will it mean to the average person?
Well, for the average person that has filed their taxes, the 2018, or if they didn't file 2018, 2019, well, if they haven't filed 2019, at least if they filed 2018, they will receive the stimulus. How and when and how quickly, they're saying 3 weeks once it's been approved, but we will wait and see how that's going to do that. But at least it's going to infuse some cash to the people that need it most. If you make 75,000 or less as an individual, you'll get 1,200, and it kind of goes down. It scales down the more you make. So if you make around 98,000, you're kind of getting nothing. And if you're joint filing, you're going to get up to 2,400, all the way down to zero, depending on how much more that you make. So I think the cap is $198,000 for joint filing, but people are going to get something. So it's going to infuse some cash. There's some other benefits as well, as far as being able to tap into your retirement savings account if necessary without penalty, and a few other things, definitely for small businesses, as well as bailout for larger businesses or industries that are affected.
Okay. So $1,200 might sound like a lot of money, if it were extra money. But we're talking about people who, in many cases, have lost their jobs. They have no income coming in right now.
Yeah.
So that might feel like a drop in the bucket to many people right now. Am I right?
Yeah, if you make $75,000 a year, that's a portion of one paycheck. So it's not a lot, but they're trying to do something and infuse something. It will help those that make around, 25,000 or less. It's definitely going to be a blessing, but it's better than nothing. So
Right. So another question then, if you haven't filed your taxes and they are potentially forgiving that for a little while, would you advise people to go ahead and file their taxes or hold off on their taxes right
well,
now?
it depends. If you owe, some people want to hold off on that. But if you are able to file your taxes, file them as soon as possible. Just because they've extended the due date doesn't mean that you can't or you shouldn't file taxes. So they've just given you a longer period of time to file the taxes. But if you are able to file your taxes as soon as possible, that would be beneficial to you.
Okay, got it. Well, I tell you, Madam Money, the House just passed in the middle of our conversation this historic $2 trillion stimulus bill, despite objections from a GOP lawmaker. So it looks like it's going to happen. I guess it still has to get signed off on, but it looks like it's going to happen. So promise you'll come back. I know you probably need to dive into it first before you can really
Yeah.
explain.
I turn my phone off for you. So as soon as I turn it on, it's going to probably
You're
pop
going to
up
get
everywhere.
big.
And so it's off to the president to sign. And then once that is signed, that's when everything will come into play, and they will frantically try to figure out how to execute it. Lawmakers are good at saying, this is what we're going to do, and leave it to everybody else to figure out how to do it. And they're not giving those people a lot of time to figure it out. So hopefully they have some things in place, or they've been thinking about this sooner than later, so that we can get it out based on what have
Right.
been promised.
All right. Well, Tara, thank you so much. Again, I want to remind people how to find you.
Find me at madamoney.com, MADAMMONEY.com, or all of my social medias, Ms. Madam Money, MSMADAMMONEY.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll check back in after you've had a chance to review this. Maybe we'll dive in next week so that we can tell people how to take advantage of this money.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tara. Have a great
My
day
pleasure.
and stay healthy.
You too.
Bye bye. All right, all of you mothers out there, can we show some serious respect and support for our teachers? No, I mean, let's just bow down. And if you're a mom and a teacher, God bless you. I mean, really, if you weren't thinking about homeschooling in the past, you have no choice but to take a crash course now. So thank you, Corona. My two teens don't even start school until next week, and I'm already feeling helpless. I reached out to a dear friend of mine who homeschools all of her children to get some real advice for us. Well, let me bring in my friend, Ruth Harrington in Connecticut, who is homeschooling 4 children. And I think she can give us a lot of advice on how to get through this with our sanity in check.
Yes. Hi, Kathleen. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so we've been homeschoolers for quite some time. We started when the kids were in kindergarten and worked their way up. So this transition for us was kind of easy. I mean, it was sort of nice to have everybody home, and they all loved the schedule of getting up a little or later and having breakfast and then diving into their classes. So yeah, so it's been really nice for us again, just sort of taking up where we left off.
Right. Now, what are your ages? Are they spread out or are they in
Yeah.
line?
Well, yeah. So the first three, so my oldest is 18. I have a 17 and a 16-year-old, and then the baby is 12, soon to be 13. So those, in
Okay.
case you're doing math, yeah, those first three were under 2 years.
Okay. And do they help one another, or like you're the teacher, you set up a classroom with all of them in the room at the same time, or do you split this all up?
Yeah, so they do. Basically, they do help each other. So the older boys may help my youngest with math because obviously they've covered it. They're doing calculus now. She's still doing algebra. That sort of thing. So it's helpful to have them pitch in and say, "Hey, can you explain this to her?" Versus just looking at the book, and that's been really helpful. And then my oldest daughter is great with grammar and history, and so she's able to even help the boys when they're coming through their English assignments. So it's really helpful to have four that are able to interact that way.
Now, do you have a dedicated place in your house where everyone sits around the dining room table, or do you have desks, or what?
Yeah, so it's funny because we've always been homeschoolers just up until the last few years when they went into private school, we set up a schoolroom basically. I had a whiteboard set up. They each had their individual desks, which is really important for them to sort of establish and own their own space. And then we had a schedule, which is really important. All those myths that homeschoolers are in their pajamas and we don't get we don't get out. I would be the first one to dispel it because I had them down at 8 o'clock. We had breakfast and we started right away. Usually by 8:30, we were already hitting math. And usually math is the first subject because that's when they're the freshest. Yeah.
And so, do you actually stand there like a teacher and teach them, or are they on their computers, or what?
Right. No, so they have their own. So I give them at the start of the week. I lay out what their assignments are going to be. So
Okay.
math is straightforward because they either sit in front of a video to do the lesson, or I have when their tutor comes in. But when I teach collectively together, it's when I'm doing a history lesson or an English lesson, and we'll just go through it together. Even the youngest, right? So she's assimilating what the other kids are doing, or I'll just do something similar and then basically grade it, like to have it same history lesson, but for the 11th grader and the 10th grader and then the 7th
And
grader.
do you let them do their homework in their room, or they have to do everything in their dedicated space?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's sort of a personal choice. I like to have a separation a little bit. Like I like them to have, if we're going to be in school, I'd like them to be in the school space. For us, it's comfortable because there are couches and lounges and desks, and so it's conducive to that. But I like them to have a separation from their bedrooms because then it just becomes sort of like
Yeah.
everything's bunched in together. I like them to have a
Yeah.
separation. Like they don't do that for school, So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I mean, I'm trying to figure this out because mine start on Monday, and they're
Yeah.
teenagers. They're 16 and 18, and so they're already telling me they're not coming out of their room, and that I
Okay.
don't need to be involved. So,
Yeah. It's going to be fine. I mean, and I think the thing that's going to be great for parents like you that are starting this is that really the work is already cut out. It's just all done for you. You're sort of monitoring it along and encouraging and just looking a little bit behind their shoulders. Hey, was this done? Just making sure that that part of it is done.
yeah.
And that's going to be helpful to them. And again, being very supportive and spending that time. I just encourage parents to spend that time with their kids. Like, hey, put the book down, come talk to me.
Right,
Let's
right.
just have that. Yeah.
All right. And finally, the biggest single piece of advice you can give to mothers or parents out there who are watching this is what?
Wow. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And ultimately this is temporary, right? So I just want to encourage you to also view it as a time to spend with your kids, that we blink and they are gone. And I just want to encourage you to think about that. This is a sweet time for them to be home. You may have a few rough patches, right? You may have a few meltdowns. That's okay. It's going to be okay. So you just continue on being that encouraging parent. And it's going to be, you guys are going to do well.
And I think I heard you say just keep a schedule, whatever you do.
Yes, absolutely. That helps immensely. I think if the kids know that it's a little bit more structured, then they know what's required of them. And that's important. I think we all miss that right now with all of this, right? The we're missing our structure, our routine.
Yes.
So, and that's been the hardest part for me, I think, not getting up and getting in the car and doing my normal things. And that's the same thing for your students, for your kids. They're missing out on that normalcy. So if you can create that for them at home, I think that's a huge advantage for sure.
Very good, Ruth. I will be having you on speed dial next week.
Okay. Please do.
I know where you live.
Okay, that's right. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot.
All right, sounds great.
Thanks, Ruth. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And finally, all right, I asked you at the top of the show how you're doing because fear and anxiety is at an all-time high right now, if you can't tell. It could be causing some strong emotions in many of us. And if you're living home with someone, then you feel the stress. There's stress from all the bad news, fears about finances, fears about being cooped up indoors. We could easily go crazy, and it could lead to feelings of loneliness and isolation. Well, according to John Weiss, a psychology professor at Harvard University, Corona can be the tipping point for some people, especially if your anxiety is already at an all-time high heightened level. So I wanted to tell you some things that the CDC said that you should be watching out for, not only for yourself, but for those you love. Check out for changes in sleep patterns, eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening chronic health problems, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. The CDC also offers some tips for how to stay mentally strong during this time of so much uncertainty. Get up when you usually get up, even if you're working from home now. Make a daily plan for yourself, for the children. Maybe try tackling some of the tasks that you usually put off, such as cleaning the house, landscaping, or cleaning out the garage. Take a walk, exercise, enjoy some downtime, and perhaps the most important thing that I heard in all of this is don't obsess about keeping up with every single new coronavirus development. It's really important to unplug once in a while, especially right now. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, I want you to stay healthy, stay happy, and stay safe.